Across both of the Philadelphia Eagles games against the Dallas Cowboys this season, the Eagles outscored the Cowboys 75-13. They showed their dominance this week with two backup quarterbacks and a running back who now has over 2,000 yards on the season. And for the second time in 3 years, the Philadelphia Eagles, with a win today, became your NFC East champions. Welcome to the Bird's Nest Podcast. I'm Joe Donahue. Thank you so much for joining us. The Eagles rebounded from last week's loss to the Washington Commanders to defeat the Dallas Cowboys by a final score of 41-7. This was a complete shellacking of the Dallas Cowboys by the Philadelphia Eagles. And at the time of this recording, the Philadelphia Eagles have at least the number 2 seed in the playoffs, having clinched the NFC East. Now, it didn't look good for the Eagles early. They started their day with 2 3-and-outs in what has become a theme for the Philadelphia Eagles offense this year. However, the Eagles were in it after the first quarter thanks to the Eagles defense. On the first drive of the game, C.J. Gardner-Johnson picked off Cooper Rush, returned it for his first pick 6 of CJ's career. That was the good news of the first quarter. The bad news is that those were the only first quarter points this game. The Eagles ended the first quarter tied 7-7. Now, as it happened, those first quarter points that the Cowboys scored were the only points that the Cowboys scored the entire game. The Eagles' defense rose to the occasion. The Cowboys couldn't even rely on their kicker, Brandon Aubrey, who doinked one off the right upright from 61 yards. This was a good game, although the Eagles' defense definitely bent. They let up 268 net offensive yards. They only got 1 sack late in the game. Quinyon Mitchell was a particular culprit. The Cowboys were targeting Quinyon Mitchell quite a bit over the course of the game. So heading into the final week of the playoffs, the Eagles really need to tighten up their coverage because there were plenty of opportunities for the Cowboys to go marching down the field, and they could have scored points. But to the Eagles' credit, the Eagles' defense did not break. And a big reason why the Cowboys didn't score more points was the fact that the Cowboys had turned the ball over 4 times in the course of the game. That C.J. Gardner-Johnson interception on the first drive was the first of them. It was definitely a harbinger of things to come. C.J. Gardner-Johnson would pick off Cooper Rush one more time later on in the game, and the Cowboys fumbled the ball twice over the course of the game. So the Eagles were +4 in that takeaway giveaway ratio. The Eagles defense also held Cooper Rush to 15 for 28 for 147 yards with 1 touchdown. Those 2 picks I alluded to. The Cowboys run game was present. Rico Dowdle got 104 yards on 23 carries. The Cowboys had 127 rushing yards total. But again, the Cowboys couldn't get anything going. They had drives that they were able to put together, but they all ended in interceptions or other really, really strong defensive plays. It was definitely a chippy game. There were a couple of ejections towards the end of it, but that's what you can expect from a Dallas Cowboys-Philadelphia Eagles matchup. So the Eagles defense rose to the occasion, and the Eagles offense, there were definitely concerns about them going into this game. Sans Jalen Hurts, who still dealing with his concussion from last week, was in the concussion protocol, couldn't clear concussion protocol prior to the game, so Kenny Pickett got the start. But once the Eagles' offense got going, it got going. Kenny Pickett, 10 for 15, 143 yards, 1 passing touchdown. Kenny Pickett also got his own rushing touchdown. This was a standout game for the Eagles quarterback from South Jersey. Growing up an Eagles fan, this was a big game for him. Now, Kenny Pickett was dealing with a rib injury going into this game. He said everything was good to go. Everything was good to go. He really showed it. There was no obvious injury, lingering stuff going on. But on the Eagles' first drive of the third quarter, Kenny Pickett was hit as he was throwing a pass towards A.J. Brown, and he wound up having to leave the game due to a rib injury. He was questionable to return. He never actually returned to the game. That led to Eagles' third-string quarterback, and 2023 6th-round pick Tanner McKee coming into the game. McKee relied very heavily on the run game, and he only went 3 for 4 for 54 yards, but one of those 3 was his first career touchdown pass to A.J. Brown. There was actually a really good moment that was captured by the Fox broadcasters, as well as some of the folks after the game. A.J. Brown accidentally launched that first touchdown ball into the stands. He was able to negotiate a trade with the fan who caught that football. The fan gave it back so that way Tanner McKee could have the first football from his first touchdown pass in an NFL game. After the game, A.J. Brown gave that fan the jersey off of his back, signed it. It was a great moment. Really one of those things that really helps humanize the game, because that was certainly a important football for Tanner McKee to have. Now, A.J. Brown, otherwise, relatively quiet. He had 3 catches on 5 targets for 36 yards and that touchdown. Devontae Smith actually had a much bigger impact. 6 catches on 7 targets for 120 yards and 2 touchdowns on the day. But the biggest offensive star today was Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley had 167 rushing yards on 31 carries. He eclipsed the 2,000 rushing yard mark this season. He became just the 9th player to do so. The other 8, Hall of Famers, all of them. The Eagles actually spent a timeout to recognize and celebrate the achievement. Saquon Barkley is also the first player to do so in his first year on a new team. This milestone is huge for the Eagles as a team. It's huge for Saquon Barkley. It's huge for the fans, because the fans know that when you're running the football, you're going to have a better time. And that's been something that fans have been begging for over the course of the last several seasons. When the Eagles have gotten away from running the football, it hasn't gone over well. But when the Eagles have committed to running the football, the Eagles set themselves up for strong seasons like the one that they're having this year. And to turn around from a team that got away from running the football last season to now having a running back with more than 2,000 rushing yards in a single season is something special. Saquon Barkley spoke about that accomplishment after the game.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. Just being a fan of the game and the running back position, to reach a milestone and put myself up there with 8 other backs that I respect, and some of them I grew up watching, definitely means a lot. But at the same time, I wouldn't be able to do that with this team. And like I said, you can't be great without the greatness of others, and I'm just happy I was able to be a part of the team and be able to reach a milestone like that.
Nick Sirianni also reflected on that, being part of something this special.
Yeah, it's special. What did you say, Bob? 9 people have done that? 9 total. And I don't know I don't know all the names, but imagine they're pretty special names. Saquon's pretty special. This offensive line's pretty special. This offense is pretty special. And so when something, I know that the guys were excited when that happened, and it's a cool thing to be a part of. Anytime you can be a part of something special, that's what's cool about being a part of a team.
But again, the most important thing for this Eagles team was the win, which secured the NFC East division for them twice in the last 3 years. It does keep the longest active streak going of no repeat division winners in the NFC East for 19 seasons. It hasn't been a repeat winner since the Eagles did it in the early part of the 2000s. But the Eagles win today gives them their 13th division win in franchise history. It's the 11th time since Andy Reid's tenure, and it's the 3rd time that it was clinched against the Dallas Cowboys in franchise history. And in addition to this, again, it was just a much-needed win for this Eagles team. The Eagles had to bounce back from the rough ending to the Commanders last week. They just had to. They can't go into the playoffs with the momentum being away from them. Football is definitely much more of a sprint when you compare it to other sports. And the Eagles had to put together this kind of a win to demonstrate that they were still the dominant team that everybody has come to expect from them. This win was also important because with the NFC East now clinched, depending on what happens in other games over the course of this weekend, the Eagles have an opportunity to rest the starters. The Eagles can finish no worse than the second seed. So while Nick Sirianni was non-committal post-game, this is likely going to be the last time that we see the starters before the playoffs. The Eagles need a lot of help from games that are occurring over the course of this week, and they need a lot of help in Week 18 in order to get the number 1 seed. And right now, at the time of this recording, it looks like that help is not coming. So the Eagles will likely rest their starters next week. They'll take a little bit of a faux bye before the playoffs. So we'll probably see either Kenny Pickett or Tanner McKee starting against the New York Giants. We'll probably also not see Saquon Barkley break the single-season rushing record of 2,105 rushing yards. Saquon's at 2,005 rushing yards right now. So we'll probably not see that rushing record broke. But again, Saquon is in that top tier of running backs. At the end of the day, though, Dallas wins hit very differently, and the Philadelphia Eagles have swept their division rivals. The only team that really, if the Eagles were to go 2-15 on the course of the season, we wouldn't like it. But as long as those 2 wins came against the Dallas Cowboys, Eagles fans would be relatively happy, so to speak. But the Eagles have swept their division rivals. They have the number 2 seed, and they have just one more game to think about before Lincoln Financial Field hosts a playoff game. And also, since reintroducing the Kelly Green jerseys, the Eagles are 4-0 in those Kelly Green jerseys. Just a little fun stat for you. But as always, let me know what you think in the comments below. What stood out to you about today's game? What needs improvement? Let me know. And thank you so much to everybody for tuning in to the Bird's Nest Podcast. You can support the Bird's Nest Podcast by liking and subscribing to Bird's Nest Media right here on YouTube, as well as by sharing to your social media pages. You can also find us on SoundCloud, iTunes, Amazon Podcasts, Spotify, and the Odyssey app. Please visit birdsnestmedia.com for additional Eagles and NFL coverage. And if you feel so inclined to support us in a different way, you can find the link to our Patreon in the description below or at birdsnestmedia.com. Thank you so much for tuning in, and let's go Eagles!